Okay, welcome back. In this lesson, you're going to learn how to use the past perfect continuous tense in English. And the past perfect continuous tense helps us talk about an action that started in the past and continued for some time before another past action. Okay? For example, I had been studying for 2 hours before the test started. Okay? This sentence, it has two past ideas. First, I was studying. Then, the test started. The studying continued for a period of time before the second past action. Okay? This is why we use the past perfect continuous. Now, the structure for this is subject plus had been, and then the verb with the ing. Okay, such as I had been studying or you had been waiting. One helpful thing about the past perfect continuous is that had been is the same for every subject. So you don't have to change it if it's I, you, we, his, hers, okay, or he, she rather. One helpful thing about the past perfect continuous is that the had been is the same for every subject. So you don't have to change it if you're using he or she, it, they, for example. So after had been, we use the ing form of the verb. So words like practicing, traveling, cooking, okay? So we can say something like, I had been studying all morning. She had been waiting for 30 minutes. They had been driving for 6 hours. We had been practicing before the performance, or he had been cooking before the guests arrive. Okay, so now let's look at when we actually use this tense. We use the past perfect continuous when we want to show that an action was happening for a period of time before another moment in the past. So both actions or both moments happened in the past, but we want to show that one was happening for a period of time before the other one. Okay? A little bit confusing, but to give you an example, she was tired because she had been working all day. Okay? What happened first? Well, she had been working all day. And what happened after that? Well, she was tired, okay? The past perfect continuous explains the reason for her condition in the past. Here's another example. They were wet because they had been walking in the rain, okay? First, they were walking in the rain, then they were wet, okay? The walking continued for some time before we saw the result, okay? Here's some more examples. I was hungry because I had been skipping meals, okay? He was nervous because he had been preparing for the interview. We were exhausted because we had been moving furniture all afternoon. The children were excited because they had been waiting for the trip. Okay? In each sentence, the past perfect continuous explains what had been happening before the other past moment. Okay? So let's compare the past perfect continuous with the past perfect. Okay? The past perfect focuses on a completed action before another past action. For example, I had cleaned the kitchen before they arrived. Okay? This means that the kitchen was cleaned and the action was finished, okay? But the past perfect continuous focuses on the activity and the duration. For example, I had been cleaning the kitchen for an hour before they arrived, okay? This means that the cleaning activity continued for 1 hour before they had arrived, okay? So let's compare a couple. She had written the report before the meeting. And then She had been writing the report for 3 hours before the meeting. The first sentence focuses on the completed result. The report was written. The second sentence focuses on the activity. Writing continued for 3 hours, okay? One more comparison. They had repaired the car before the trip, okay? And then they had been repairing the car all morning before the trip, okay? The first sentence tells us that the repair was complete. The second sentence tells us that the repair activity continued for a period of time, okay? So now let's talk about common time expressions, okay? We often use the past perfect continuous with words like for, since, all morning, all day, for several hours, before, by the time, okay? Let me give you an example. I had been studying for 2 hours before I took a break. She had been training for 6 months before the race. They had been searching for a parking space for 20 minutes. We had been discussing the problem for a long time. Okay? And we can also use the word since as a starting point, okay? Or with a starting point. For example, since Monday, since 9 o'clock, since last year, since the morning, okay? He had been working there since January before he changed jobs. They had been waiting since 8 o'clock before the office opened. She had been feeling sick since the morning before she called the doctor, okay? Now let's make a few negative sentences, okay? And for a negative sentence, the structure is subject had not been, and then the verb with ing, okay? So for an example, I had not been sleeping well, okay? She had not been paying attention. They had not been practicing enough. We had not been using the correct method. And in speaking, we often use contractions. So instead of saying had not, we would use hadn't been, okay? For example, I hadn't been sleeping well. She hadn't been paying attention. They hadn't been practicing enough. We hadn't been using the correct method, okay? So to ask a question, you just have to move had before the subject. So the had here comes before the subject, then been, then the verb ing, okay? So for example, had you been studying, okay? Had she been working? Had they been waiting? Had he been driving? Okay? And if you want to include some short answers in this example, you can say, had you been studying? Yes, I had. No, I hadn't, with the contracted form, okay? Had she been working? Yes, she had. No, she hadn't. Okay, so now we're just going to look at a few common mistakes. Mistake number 1 is forgetting been, okay? It would be incorrect to say, I had studying for 2 hours. She had working all day, okay? You want to say, I had been studying for 2 hours. She had been working all day. Mistake number 2, using the base verb instead of the ing form. They had been wait. He had been drive, okay? You would want to say, they had been waiting. He had been driving. Mistake number 3, using have instead of had, okay? You wouldn't want to say, I have been studying before the test started, okay? You would want to say, I had been studying before the test started, okay? Use had been when both ideas are in the past, okay? Mistake number 4 is confusing the past perfect with the past perfect continuous. If you want to focus on the completed result, use the past perfect, okay? Like, I had read the chapter before class, okay? If you want to focus on the activity and the time, use the past perfect continuous. For example, I had been reading the chapter for an hour before class, okay? So just to do a very quick review, the past perfect continuous tense talks about an action that started in the past and continued before another past action or past moment. The structure generally is subject plus had been plus verb with ing, okay? And we know that the past perfect continuous is useful because it helps you explain what was happening before another past event. It is especially helpful when telling stories or explaining reasons or describing how long something had been happening, okay? Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next lesson.